They thought I was losing my mind. That was the part that almost made me laugh. Almost. When I overheard them in the kitchen, voices low, thinking I was napping in the den. My son-in-law said it first, the way he always does, like he's the smartest person in any room he walks into. He's not tracking the way he used to. We need to move on this before he figures out what we're doing. And my daughter, my own daughter, said nothing. Just the sound of a coffee mug being set down on the counter. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer with the city of Ottawa. I designed drainage systems that still run under streets you've walked on. I am not losing my mind. But I let them think I was. My wife, Nora, passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end, and I have never in my life felt anything like that kind of fast grief, the kind that doesn't give you time to prepare, that just hits you like a transport truck on the 417. After she was gone, the house felt like a museum. Every room had her in it, and also didn't. I rattled around in it for 2 years before my daughter convinced me to let her and her husband move in. Help with upkeep, she said. Keep you company, she said. You shouldn't be alone at your age, she said. I should have listened to what she wasn't saying. Her husband. I'll call him what he is, my son-in-law, though the word sits sour in my mouth now. Had been between jobs since before they got married. He had a habit of starting things and not finishing them. A landscaping business that lasted one summer, a home renovation venture that ended with a lien on someone else's property, a consulting period that I'm still not entirely sure what it was consulting on. My daughter worked as a dental hygienist in Kanata. She made decent money, but together they carried debt the way some people carry a bad back. Always there, always adjusting around it. Moving in with me solved several problems for them at once. The first year was fine. Better than fine, actually. There was noise in the house again. My daughter would cook on Sunday nights, big pots of soup the way her mother used to, and for a while I could almost pretend things were normal. My son-in-law fixed the back fence and repainted the garage door without being asked, and I thought maybe I was wrong about him. Maybe people do settle. The second year, things shifted. It started small. My son-in-law began asking questions about my pension, how it was structured, whether it was indexed, what happened to it when I died. I answered plainly because I had nothing to hide, and because I assumed he was thinking about their own retirement planning. Then he started asking about the house, what it was worth now given the market, whether I'd ever consider a reverse mortgage, whether I had an updated will. I told him I had a will. I did not tell him what was in it. Around that same time, I started having trouble sleeping, not the garden variety kind. This was different. I'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning with my heart pounding, a heaviness in my chest I couldn't explain. I thought it was grief, delayed and rearranged into something physical. I saw my doctor. He adjusted my blood pressure medication. The symptoms didn't improve. In October of that second year, my daughter sat me down and suggested, gently and with great apparent concern, that I might benefit from transitional housing. She used that exact phrase, transitional housing. A retirement community in Kanata, she said. Beautiful facility, activities, people your own age, and she said you'd have company, Dad. Real company, not just us. I looked at her face while she said it. I'd known that face since the delivery room at the Civic Hospital in 1987. I'd kissed that forehead 10,000 times. And I could clearly see that she was uncomfortable. Not because the conversation was hard, because she had rehearsed it. I said I'd think about it. I did not think about it. Instead, I started paying attention. I began keeping a small notebook in the breast pocket of my housecoat, the kind of thing you'd use for grocery lists or phone numbers. I wrote down dates and times. What was said, who said it, what the context was. I wrote down when my son-in-law was on the phone in the garage with the door closed. I wrote down when documents went missing from my desk, my investment statements, the deed to the house, the folder I kept with Nora's insurance paperwork. Nothing dramatic, just observations, dates and times. I also started recording. I had an old digital voice recorder that I used to use on site visits, back when I was working. Fit in a shirt pocket. I began leaving it running when I left the room during family conversations, tucked under the couch cushion or inside the magazine rack by the armchair. I didn't record everything, just conversations I had a feeling about. The kind of feeling an engineer gets when something doesn't add up on paper. Not anger, not paranoia. Just the quiet certainty that the numbers are wrong and you need to find out why. What I found out was worse than I expected. In November, I listened back to a recording from a Tuesday evening. My daughter and son-in-law alone in the living room about 20 minutes after I'd gone upstairs. My son-in-law's voice flat and practical. The POA is the thing. Once we have the POA, we can move the RRRSPs and the TFSA without him knowing. The house is trickier because of land registry, but if he's declared incapacitated and my daughter's voice cutting him off, he's not going to be declared incapacitated. He's not actually losing it. And him again, that's not how it works. You get the right doctor, the right assessment, and you can make a case. He's old, he lives alone. He doesn't live alone, we're here. You know what I mean. I sat in my car in the driveway and listened to that recording 3 times. Then I drove to a Tim Hortons on Carling Avenue and sat in a corner booth for an hour and a half, drinking coffee I didn't taste, thinking about what to do. I want to be clear about something. My first feeling was not anger. It came later. My first feeling was grief. A second kind of it. Different from what I felt when Nora died, but related to it, like a tributary of the same river. Because the person on that recording was my daughter, the little girl I drove to skating lessons at 5 in the morning in February, the one I walked down the aisle. And she hadn't stopped him. She hadn't said, "We are not doing this to my father." She'd only objected to the logistics. I gave myself that hour and a half to feed it. Then I drove home, went upstairs, and went to sleep. The next morning I was up at 6, same as always. I made my coffee and read the paper and said good morning to my son-in-law when he came down, same as always. I had work to do. The first call I made was to a lawyer, not the one who'd done our wills, because he was someone my daughter knew. I found a new one, a woman in Westboro who specialized in estate law and elder financial abuse. I explained the situation and played her excerpts from the recordings. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Mister, I need you to understand. What's being described here is a criminal matter, not just a civil one. Conspiracy to commit fraud, potentially. And if they'd succeeded in having you declared incapacitated without proper grounds, we're talking about elder abuse under the criminal code." She asked how much was at stake. I told her. She said, "We need to move carefully." And quickly. We moved carefully. It took 4 months. During those 4 months, I did not change my behavior at home by a single degree. I watched television in the evenings. I went to my Tuesday card game at the community center in Nepean. I attended my grandson's hockey games and cheered from the stands in my red wool hat. And I let my son-in-law buy me a hot chocolate from the concession stand, and I said thank you. I was a picture of an old man, content in his routine. What I was actually doing, I worked with my lawyer to have my will revised and my estate plan restructured, entirely without my daughter's knowledge. The house was placed in a trust. My RRSPs, my TFSA, my pension survivor benefits, all redesignated. My lawyer filed a document with the Ontario government that would make any future attempt to establish a fraudulent power of attorney extremely difficult, flagged for automatic review. I also had my physician run a full cognitive assessment, not because there was any doubt in my mind, but because I wanted documentation. The assessment showed no cognitive impairment of any kind. My doctor, a practical woman who'd seen a few things in 30 years of practice, wrote it up in clinical language that left no room for interpretation. Patient demonstrates full cognitive capacity and decision-making ability consistent with a healthy adult. She asked me why I wanted it. I told her I had reason to believe someone might try to argue otherwise. She looked at me for a moment, then said, "I'll make sure this is very thorough." It was. In March, my son-in-law made his move. I had expected something, but not quite this. He arrived home one evening with a man he introduced as a financial planning consultant. Polished, mid-40s, the kind of suit that costs money but not too much money. They sat me down at the kitchen table, my own kitchen table, and the consultant began explaining, with great warmth and patience, the benefits of a power of attorney arrangement for managing complex financial assets. He had brochures. He had a tablet with a presentation. He spoke slowly, I noticed, the way people speak to someone they believe has difficulty following. My son-in-law sat beside him with his hands folded, watching my face. I asked 2 questions. First, was this gentleman a registered financial planner with the Financial Planning Standards Council? He hesitated. I said I could look it up on my phone right now, if that was easier. Second, had my son-in-law discussed the specifics of my estate with this gentleman prior to this meeting? Another hesitation. I thanked them both for coming. I said I'd need to review the materials with my own legal counsel before proceeding with anything. My son-in-law's jaw went tight in the way it does when things aren't going the way he planned. The consultant left. My son-in-law didn't speak to me for the rest of the evening. 2 weeks later, I received notice that my son-in-law had filed a formal application with the Ontario Court for guardianship of my person and property on grounds of cognitive decline and inability to manage my own affairs. He had a doctor's letter. Not my doctor, a different one. A private assessment clinic that I later learned had been used before in cases like this, where families pressure physicians for favorable findings. I called my lawyer that same night. She said, "Good, this is exactly what we needed." The hearing was set for a Tuesday in April at the Superior Court of Justice on Elgin Street. I took the bus. I know that sounds strange. I do own a car. But I'd spent 40 years going downtown on the 95 in the morning, and something about taking that route again settled me. I sat near the window and watched the city go by and thought about Nora, the way she used to pack lunch for me on site visit days. Turkey on rye, always a cookie she'd added without telling me, tucked in the side of the bag. I wore the charcoal suit I'd bought for my son's wedding in 2019, white shirt, dark tie. My shoes were polished. I had my briefcase. My son-in-law arrived with my daughter and their lawyer, a man I recognized from his photo on a firm website, the kind of firm that advertised heavily and specialized in, as they put it, protecting family interests. They were well dressed. My daughter's face was pale and she didn't look directly at me. My son-in-law looked confident in the way people look when they think they've already won. Their lawyer presented the guardianship application. He submitted the private cognitive assessment. He spoke about my increasing isolation, my difficulty managing complex financial decisions, my apparent confusion about the current value of my assets. It was, I'll give him this, a polished presentation, the kind you give when you've done this before. Then my lawyer stood up. She submitted the cognitive assessment from my own physician, comprehensive, dated, unambiguous. She submitted the timeline of events I had documented, with dates and names and specifics, cross-referenced against financial records showing no abnormal transactions on my accounts. She submitted the audio recordings, which are legal to make in Ontario under criminal code provisions when one party to the conversation consents, and I was that party. She submitted the documentation showing my estate plan had been revised in full capacity with independent legal witnesses months before the guardianship application was filed. And then she played 43 seconds of audio in open court, my son-in-law's voice clear as anything. Once we have the POA, we can move the RRSPs and the TFSA without him knowing. The room was quiet in the specific way rooms get when something has shifted, and everyone present understands it. The judge, a woman maybe 55, the kind of face that has seen a great many things and is not easily surprised. looked at my son-in-law's lawyer for a long moment. Then she looked at my son-in-law. Then she looked at me. She asked if I had anything I wished to add. I said only that I designed water infrastructure for this city for 3 decades, that I am in full possession of my faculties, and that I am asking the court to protect my right to manage my own affairs. She dismissed the guardianship application immediately without adjournment. Then she referred the matter to the Crown for review under the Criminal Code of Canada, specifically sections relating to fraud and elder financial abuse. She noted that the audio evidence suggested a premeditated plan to fraudulently obtain control of an elderly person's assets. She used the word premeditated. She said it clearly, looking at my son-in-law as she said it. His face did something I hadn't expected. It didn't go angry, it went small, like something folding in on itself. My daughter was crying by the time we left the courtroom, not the performed kind, the real kind, the ugly kind that you can't control. She tried to speak to me in the hallway. I stopped and I looked at her, and I thought of all the things I could say. I thought of the Sunday soups. I thought of the skating lessons. I thought of the 10,000 kisses on that forehead. I said, I'm going to need you to find somewhere else to live by the end of the month. Then I walked to the elevator and took it down to the lobby and went outside into the April air, which was still cold the way Ottawa April always is, sharp with the last edge of winter. And I stood on the steps for a moment and just breathed. My son-in-law was charged 8 weeks later, 3 counts under the criminal code, including participation in a scheme to defraud. His lawyer negotiated it down eventually. These things always get negotiated. But he received a conditional sentence of 20 months, community service, and the prohibition order that prevents him from serving in any financial or legal capacity for another person for 10 years. He and my daughter are separated. I did not engineer that. It happened on its own. My daughter wrote me a letter in September. 4 pages, handwritten, the kind of letter that takes a long time to write. I read it twice. I have not yet written back. Not because I don't intend to, I do. But because I want to find the right words. I am 67 years old, and I have learned, finally, that some things deserve to be said slowly and exactly right. The house is quiet again, different from the museum quiet after Nora. This is just ordinary quiet, the kind that belongs to a person living in their own space on their own terms. I have my Tuesday card game. I have my red wool hat and my grandson's hockey games. The cookie is still there. Every time I pack my own lunch now, I put it in myself, tucked in the side, and every time it surprises me a little anyway. I was never losing my mind. I was just deciding when to speak. I think about my son-in-law's face in that courtroom a lot. Not with satisfaction, exactly, but with something closer to recognition. That look when the recording played. The way he went small. I've seen that look before, actually, on construction sites when an engineer presents the load calculations and the contractor realizes the corner he cut is now on paper, in front of everyone. It's the look of a person who believed the plan was smarter than the truth. It never is. What I've come to understand, sitting with all of it these past months, is that what saved me wasn't luck. It wasn't even the recordings or the lawyer or the cognitive assessment, though all of those mattered. What saved me was a decision I made in a Tim Hortons booth on Carling Avenue, the decision to think before I acted, to be precise instead of reactive. I spent 31 years as an engineer because I learned early that feelings don't hold up a bridge, evidence does, patience does, doing the work correctly the first time does. I just applied the same principle to my own life when it mattered most. There's something I want to say about integrity, because I think it gets talked about in lofty ways that don't mean much. For me, it was simple. I could have confronted them the night I heard that recording. I could have thrown them out of the house in November, changed the locks, made phone calls. I wanted to. I will not pretend I didn't. But I knew that wanting to react and knowing what to do are two different things. and confusing them would have cost me everything. Integrity in practice is the gap between what you feel and what you choose to do. I stayed quiet. I stayed careful. I did not lie or manipulate or forge anything. I just documented what was already true, and then I let the truth speak in a room where it counted. I also think about my daughter, not with bitterness. I'm past that mostly, but with a kind of painful clarity. She's not a bad person. I believe that. But she made choices, one at a time, that took her somewhere she didn't expect to end up. That's how it usually goes. Nobody wakes up deciding to become someone who betrays their father. They just don't stop themselves at the small moments, the ones that feel minor at the time. The moment she didn't say, "We are not doing this." She had that moment and she let it pass. And the thing about letting those moments pass is that eventually the current gets too strong and you're somewhere you can't easily come back from. That's the part I hope she's sitting with in her own way. I didn't get through this because I'm exceptional. I got through it because when the situation asked me to be steady, I found out I still could be. That steadiness, the kind that holds when everything around you is pulling. That's something you build over decades. Every time you do the honest thing when the easier thing is available. Every time you don't take the shortcut. Every time you sit with hard information and think it through instead of reacting to it. I was 67 years old, and it turned out that mattered. All of it had been practice. The house is mine, the quiet is mine, and I still put the cookie in the side of the bag.